Hi, and welcome to WVU Comm Mooc, our first massive online open course. My name is Elizabeth Cohen, and I'm an assistant professor of communication studies at West Virginia University. This week I've been talking a lot about media multitasking. Up until this point, I've been mostly focusing on a lot of the challenges of media multitasking. So how, with our limited cognitive capacity in the brain, for instance, we can take in and deal with more than one task that comes in. Or how do these limitations translate into challenges in our everyday life, social challenges, health challenges, productivity challenges. Today, I want to maybe recommend some strategies to help us deal with these challenges. And the optimal word here is definitely deal or cope with. I mentioned before that I kind of regret titling the course Conquering Cyber Overload, because I don't think that's necessarily a reasonable goal to have. I don't think that we're ever going to be able to fully escape the demands that media place on us to multitask. I think the best strategy is to just look for strategies to just better handle these things. Sort of evidence of how pervasive these demands are in our society. The very week that I'm filming this, Google Glass came out, which is literally, right, the new face of media multitasking. This takes multitasking to an entirely new level. You see here, somebody has what appears to be mostly normal glasses, except for right here, there's a little image emitting device that allows you to perform the same types of things that you would do with an app on a smartphone. Right here, for instance, we've got somebody checking the weather while they're looking out on the city. And here we have somebody that's, I guess, mapping a GPS walk somewhere, also appears to be in the city. By the way, what I love about these images is that it's really quite, it probably accurately reflects what's going on with your attention at the time. Whereas in the foreground you have a very clear image, but in the background, because all of your attentional resources are dedicated at that image, everything else seems a little bit blurry. Anyway, again, with technology like this coming out, it's probably not a reasonable goal to think that you're ever going to be able to overcome it. So I want to talk about ways that we can maybe restrict it a little bit so it's more manageable, or just find better ways of coping with those demands. In the research that I did, two, I guess, main strategies sort of popped out about ways that we can deal with environments that have high levels of media interference. One is to just try to get rid of the interference altogether, to put it aside for a little while and you know, keep it away from us. But the other one is more of a, if you can't beat them, join them philosophy. So, well, maybe you're not necessarily trying to get rid of the pressures that you feel. You instead are just finding productive ways of better coping with it. So that's sort of the outline for how we're going to approach this. Let's start with one recommended way of just getting rid of, or maybe a better way of setting boundaries on the types of media interference in your life. This comes from Dr. Joanne Cantor's book, Conquering Cyber Overload, and aptly, right, named Conquering, because she is talking about putting it in its place, right? Shut off social media, she says. Email, cell phones, all different types of things that you use to communicate with other people. But importantly, she wants you to schedule breaks. This is going to be an ongoing theme. Schedule breaks because if you can't connect, right, that could be upsetting to you and the other people around you, which is why she also says let people know that you will be able to communicate with them later, that you'll be available to them, and then that will hopefully reduce some of the temptation to bother you while you're working. One of the things I really like is her recommendation to jot down irrelevant thoughts or bookmark unrelated websites for later. Let's say you're doing research for a project online, but you find yourself going to Wikipedia to check up some, you know, irrelevant information. Instead of just trying to block that out, she does recommend just putting them aside, making yourself a note. So A, you don't feel like you're being deprived of going to these sites, but B, you can actually start to become a little bit more aware of the things that are distracting you. It would be very interesting to me if I were to do this, I think, and had a list of all the things that distracted me. I might not even want to know if I start to see patterns, but if I did, right, it would give me more a higher level of awareness and therefore greater capacity to sort of deal with whatever my temptations are. In her recommendations, of course, taking breaks was an important part of this. And taking breaks has been shown to actually help your attention in many cases, because what happens is mental concentration does become fatigued. I'm sure you know when this happens to you because you do find your mind wandering a little bit more. You feel literally a processing strain. Taking short breaks can refresh attention and improve task productivity, even if it's media-related breaks, by the way. And the idea of us working on a task for a set amount of time and then shifting to another task might even be considered media multitasking in some cases, but not if it's planned, right? Not if you set those goals. One study even found, by the way, that breaks to look at cute animal pictures might do the trick, which, of course, resonated with me. These are actually my cute animals right here. My little puggy and my little... He's a mutt. I don't know what he is, but he's adorable, isn't he? So the idea that you would, set some time aside to do whatever you want. This is actually the major component of what's called the Pomodoro Technique. Pomodoro's tomato for, it's Italian for tomato. This doesn't actually have anything to do with tomatoes, I found out. It's just because the inventor of this technique used a timer that was a tomato, and thus. But the timer is really the important part. What's supposed to happen here is you're going to decide on a task to be done. You're going to set aside approximately 25 minutes, just some sort of standardized amount of time. And you're going to work uninterrupted. You'll set your timer for that 25 minutes. And then once the timer goes off, you'll give yourself a short break, because it's important to, again, have these breaks scheduled. After 4 times of getting through your set 25-minute goals, you can take a much longer break. So the idea is you'll get about 100 minutes of productivity in with about 15 minutes of breaks, but then you can take maybe like a 30-minute break at the end. Eventually, you're not supposed to need a timer at all. You're supposed to be able to self-regulate. And from what I've read, at least, this can happen very quickly. It just sets a new state of mind for how you work. While you're doing this, it's recommended that you train yourself to be mindful of whether you're doing is working towards your goal or not. The idea is that timer is sort of like, holding you accountable, and that helps you recognize when you're on task and when you're off task. But eventually, again, you really shouldn't need the clock. Some people find it helpful to purchase what's called blocking productivity software. What this does, it doesn't actually block productivity. It's blocking software that's supposed to help productivity. Blocking software disables parts of your computer to block out unwanted internet distractions and diversions. It varies in how much of the internet can be blocked out depending on the software you get, but the general idea is that you'll set you'll put on your blocking software, and then sometimes not until you even restart, you have to reboot your computer before you have access again. So it's just an extra measure of self-restraint. Well, no, not self-restraint. It's just an extra measure of restraint that would keep you from getting off task. One of the examples is Freedom, which literally blocks out the entire internet. That one does require you to reboot. But some people need the internet because the task that they're working on, uses the internet. I often do research on the internet. So anti-social software might be a little bit better, where you can block certain sites, such as any social media site like Facebook. Of course, I personally feel that while these tools might be somewhat helpful, some good training wheels, they don't really address the underlying problem of attention. So while I would never dissuade anybody from getting them, I would recommend that we start looking at other ideas that get at the core of our attention. Okay, or our consciousness, as Linda Stone would say. Linda Stone has a blog where you can read more about her idea of conscious computing. We've got lindastone.net up there. She talks about how computers and other technologies are sort of brain enhancers. They extend our minds, and our minds love them. Our minds have sort of this love affair with technology, and they get together and they start doing all sorts of crazy things, but in the meantime, our body sort of gets left behind. One of the examples she uses to illustrate this is a term she's coined as screen apnea or email apnea originally, which is a temporary absence or suspension of breathing or shallow breathing while performing activities in front of the screen. Right now, how are you breathing? You may notice, as if you start trying to pick up on it, that you do have a little bit more shallow breathing, and occasionally it might even stop, just like sleep apnea. That's the idea. There are various reasons she suggests that this might happen. One of them is physical posture. But whatever the case is, this screen apnea she talks about triggers stress responses, much like you know, when we talked about adrenaline pumping out before because of multitasking, right? And this is going to have a harmful effect on our attention, because once adrenaline comes out, which is supposed to help us be aware of our surroundings, right? Be constantly screening. It's going to be much harder to focus. So it's almost as if sitting in front of the computer all day on a task with this issue of screen apnea could actually make it harder to focus. So what's the remedy? What is conscious computing? Be mindful of how your attention is being distributed, she says. Be mindful of how the body is responding. Pay attention to how you're breathing right now while you're sitting in front of the screen. Various feedback tools she recommends can help with this. One that she didn't recommend, but happened to be cheaper, I actually have coming in the mail for me right now, so I guess check into the discussion boards to see how that works out. I got my Comm Beat, and this is a little illustration of it down here, where what happens is I get hooked up to a heart rate monitor while I'm at my desk, and it feeds this information into my computer. Another form of multitasking, actually, dual screens, but yes, it feeds into my computer. So as I'm doing things throughout the day at my desk where people come in, I can actually see how my heart rate changes and fluctuates, and that gives me a better idea of what my stress triggers are. But then if I can start to be more aware of how I'm breathing, this I can start to develop techniques to reduce my stress as it's happening, or even maybe even head it off. The other advice, of course, is just breathe. Start focusing on having a sustained, more deep breath while you're in front of your computer or whatever device. Any screen, she says, actually. Besides that, there are also, again, we're now in the class of strategies that's, if you can't beat them, then join them, right? So we're not interested in getting rid of multitasking, but we're looking for ways that we might be able to better cope with it. Brain training exercises could be very effective with this. There is some emerging research that suggests that if we practice some of the cognitive processing skills that we already have, we can get better at them. We can train our prefrontal cortex to switch tasks faster. So this, of course, would improve our multitasking productivity. I don't know if we would ever get to the level of those super taskers that seem to be a very small percent of the population that don't generally lose time when they're handling multiple tasks. But I think this is key. It could also strengthen our ability to resist distraction, because as I mentioned in the cognitive in the cognitive lecture, sometimes improving focus isn't necessarily the most important thing. It's just being able to resist the distractions that enter into our realm of attention. There's a number of different web and mobile cognitive exercise applications you can download. Some of them are free. Some of them are free to a point, like you can only access some of the games and then they'll start charging you. And others you can get a subscription to. And there's not a whole lot of research on these sites that I'm aware of. However, I do know that a lot of the games that they put on these sites are actually the same types of things that researchers use in their labs to test, for instance, working memory or attention and things like that. So it's of a similar nature, and the idea is the more you do it, the better your brain can get at it. One of the more fun ways that you could exercise your brain is perhaps video games. There is a growing body of research that suggests that playing immersive video games can improve people's ability to focus. Call of Duty is actually one of these games that they found has this effect. And this isn't just correlational research. They're finding experimentally that people, after playing the game, actually have improved measures of focus. I say up here, one study found that after playing a shooting game, brains showed electrical activity consistent with processes that enhance visual attention and suppress distracting information. So you see, this is doing both. It's got the suppression aspect where we're trying to only focus on what's relevant and try to ignore the stuff that we don't need so that our attention doesn't get diverted. But it also enhances visual attention. It just makes us more focused. So I think that's a very, very cool line of research, especially because video games often get, for whatever reason, a pretty bad reputation as being a distractor. As being something that might cause things like attention deficit disorder and things like that. But again, this research is showing that it can actually help improve focus and distraction ignoring. Okay, so we've gone through a couple of ways that we might refine multitasking skills. And to sort of like wrap up this session, I want to talk about some of the ideas that are being circulated about why this might be something that we need to do on a societal level. I want to introduce you to something called the farmer versus hunter hypothesis. This isn't actually something that's necessarily been, that's emerged from research. It actually came from a father whose son has ADHD. And what he observed is that, you know, hunters and farmers have different cognitive skills that they need in order to be successful at their job. If you engage in farmer tasks, you need localized, focused attention. If you're a hunter, though, you need to be tracking prey all the time. So you have to be sort of shifting your attention to pay attention to all of the things, all of the different signs in the environment that might lead you to find that prey. Schools, he says, have been designed to create farmers that just that focus on one thing. So think about our classes. We take literature classes in school where we focus on long, complex novels. In order to succeed, right, you need to be able to sort of sit there and immerse yourself in that novel. What we don't have, at least not that I'm aware of in high school or, you know, whatever level, are classes that, you know, emphasize quickly shifting through vast quantities of information on a search engine, right? Which might be more of a hunter type attentional task. Schools adapted to the needs of hunters would value the ability to scan the environment for meaning information. This is actually an argument by Henry Jenkins, who's a really prominent critical cultural scholar who talks about, he actually wrote a white paper, this is a quote from it, a white paper on the skills that children need to succeed in what we call participatory culture, a culture where online it's not just about reading things, but it's about involving, it's about creating, it's about changing. Like think about Wikipedia, for instance, right? Wikipedia, though we get a lot of information from it, what makes it what it is all of the participation in it, and that's the sort of society we're living in. He says multitasking involves a method of monitoring and responding to the sea of information around us. Students need help distinguishing between being off task, right, distraction, and handling multiple tasks simultaneously. They must learn to recognize the relationship between information coming at them from multiple directions and making reasonable hypotheses and models based on partial, fragmented, or intermittent information. All part of the world they will confront in the workplace. They need to know when and how to pay close attention to a specific input, as well as when and how to scan the environment searching for meaningful data. In other words, we might need to start thinking about how to train hunters. We have farmers, and there are some other theorists that are talking about these issues and envisioning a world where there's going to be divisions of labor based around these different types of skills. Those that can multitask in a meaningful way, those that, not necessarily that they're because they're deficient, but are farmers, because what's needed for whatever they can contribute is that sort of like focused attention. And I think all these are issues that are important to discuss, and I want to sort of close this week's session on this idea because, you know, you read a lot in the popular press about how bad multitasking is. And then the next week something will come out and talk about how good multitasking is. And I guess on a much more macro level, what I would like to suggest is that this culture where Google Glass is coming out and making it much easier for us to walk while we're surfing the internet at the same time, is not necessarily a good or bad thing. It's just a different thing. And what we really need to focus on is how do we cope with this? Okay, so that's all the content I have. I'd like to sort of now throw it over to you guys with the discussion questions. Again, please, if you can, go to wvucommooc.org, and you can find discussion boards here where you can interact with other people who are contemplating these same questions. The first thing I'm really curious about is, based on these methods, or maybe even others that I haven't presented, which methods of coping with media interference do you think you'd be the most likely to adopt, and why? You may have even you might be able to even tell that I'm more partial to some than others, though that wasn't my intention. Number two, this lecture did not address ways of coping or preventing negative effects of media interference on our personal relationships. This is a problem that we talked about in one of the former slides, but we didn't really address here. What strategies would you recommend to make sure that media multitasking doesn't interfere with our face-to-face communication? In other words, is it just as simple as saying that we collectively need to have, you know, social taboos around taking a cell phone out at a dinner table? Do we even need some type of etiquette? Just something to chew on. And number three, do you think the current educational models found in schools that emphasize focused attention, right, for the farmers, rather than continuous partial attention should prevail? Why or why not? I'm really interested to get your feedback on it. I think these ideas are really interesting. And again, I think it helps us understand a little bit more about where we could possibly be headed. Okay, well, that concludes it. I really have enjoyed doing this, and I hope that I'll see some of you guys, I'll see some of you guys mediated through social media, and if we can keep this dialogue going, I would be thrilled. Thank you very, very much for your time.